listening to a new episode of The Brave Technologist, and this one features Jimmy Secretan, CTO of JustWin, which is an AI infrastructure that empowers small businesses to find and win government contracts. Jimmy holds a Ph.D. from a machine learning lab at the University of Central Florida, where he specialized in large-scale, privacy-safe neural networks, and previously served as the VP of Ads and Premium Services here at Brave. During his time on our team, Jimmy helped launch Brave's global private ad platform, led the development of premium functionality for the web browser, and managed initiatives like Brave News and Brave Talk. In this episode, we discussed building solutions to help small businesses win government contracts, his approach to open-endedness in AI and why that matters, balancing innovation and privacy as a builder, and GPT-5 and its predictions for its future impact. And now for this week's episode of The Brave Technologist. Jimmy, welcome to The Brave Technologist, as a Brave Technologist, or formerly.
Thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's great to catch up. Let's kind of level set a little bit for the audience, maybe folks who aren't as familiar with you. Like, what kind of drew you into machine learning, and how has your perspective evolved since your PhD days in privacy-safe neural networks?
Yeah, so I've always been, pretty interested. Like, I was this kid, AI, robotics kind of thing, and loved also sort of the high performance computing aspects. I built like clusters and cluster computers in high school, and I loved it. And that was, one of my first jobs when I went to school here at UCF. One of my first jobs was building, high performance cluster computers, and we called them Beowulfs in those days. It's like very
That's awesome.
Ancient terminology, but I love that. I used to say we would build them to idle faster than any other computer on campus, because that would be like, okay, well, what do you do with these, super cool computers now? And took that, even interested in the undergrad, like took that and turned it into, okay, yeah, well, what if we took these, super high performance computers and we're running neural networks on these, had a deep interest in neural networks. This was the early aughts. And then, and that actually sort of went into my grad work, where we focused on these, like large scale parallel neural networks. And it's very common now, but kind of back then, it was sort of, I remember telling some people sometimes, like, oh yeah, we're going to take these neural networks and we're going to run them on, these hundreds of cluster nodes. And sometimes people would ask that, well, why would you need to do that?
Right.
It's like most neural networks at the time just didn't really need that, and it wasn't super fashionable or anything. And so would be like, oh no, actually you can do these great things. Like if you add lots more data, you can really squeak out performance and all these interesting things. And so loved all that stuff, and I ended up doing my dissertation around large scale privacy preserving neural networks. So, my advisor brought to me one day, oh yeah, hey, did you know you can take all these cool neural networks and lots of individual organizations can kind of run them together. They can keep their data private and compute interesting and useful things on the output of the data that can really help without sort of compromising everybody's privacy. And it was just super interesting to me, and all the creative ways that you had to, hash certain things and combine certain things and not share certain data and do this analysis. And so that sort of combined with the, okay, we want to make really large scale neural networks and do super interesting things. That was super core interest of mine. And it is so cool that, I remember just being a grad student trying out some neural network on fuzzy art map neural networks that are called. And it was sort of, it ran a little faster. And it was kind of like, well, would anybody really need to do this at this scale? And it's just super cool to see, basically 20 years later, oh, this is like super important. This is super vital.
It's
now.
wild.
This runs a lot of the kind of new interesting piece of the economy. And so
it's wild thinking about it. Like, yeah, it's almost like 20 years ahead of the curve on that. And then at the same time, too, just thinking about Sam Altman on Theo Von telling people not to make OpenAI their therapist, because of privacy. Like the fact that you guys were thinking about privacy even back then was pretty awesome, too.
Yeah, because it was very clear that to do really interesting stuff with it, you needed to have access to a lot of the data. But of course, it was like, okay, you're actually trying to use technology to solve this social problem too, of saying, yeah, people aren't going to do that. They're not going to want to do that for a lot of reasons.
Mhm.
Okay, what can you still do in that case?
Yeah. Well, what kind of inspired you to take on this the role of CTO at JustWin, and what problem are you most excited to solve when you joined, and how much of that revolves around user first thing?
Yeah. So what I was doing before this, it was a social media startup called Maven.
Hmm.
And we have, you guys know we advertised on Brave a lot,
Yeah, yeah, it was
and
awesome.
very interesting. And it was trying to be this a social network where AI was very core to it and help people sort of discover interesting things in ways that the traditional sort of machine learning recommenders couldn't, and find all these great serendipitous things. And I learned the valuable lesson that social media is hard. It's sometimes you have the juice, sometimes you don't. And so as that was winding down, I was trying to figure out, okay, well, what could I do next? And met the co-founders at JustWin. We were called Breeze RFP at the time, and Ted and Connor. And first, they were super great guys, just super interesting to talk to, incredibly proficient at kind of marketing slash operations. It's just exciting to work with people you feel are just like, oh, these guys are good at what they do.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And second, I had talked to a lot of people, in that kind of year of just getting ideas from people. It's like, okay, what would make sense for you to do next, kind of in this environment. And one of the threads that started to come together was, you know what? Of all the cool, fun, flashy looking things, a lot of times we were doing on Maven with, okay, it's you generating images and you're talking and you're chatting. A lot, I think, of the value that AI is going to bring is on those tasks that are just they don't seem as exciting. It's like, and it really comes down to, hey, out there in the world, there's a ton of documentation and stuff in PDFs and things that people have to pour through and figure out and cross reference and digest and ultimately action on, whether it's commercial real estate contracts or government RFPs. Because I didn't have any background really in government RFPs. I responded to a couple in the past and been part of a government contractor, but it was super interesting to me that, like, oh, actually, this is sort of very what JustWin does is very core to a lot of interesting use cases out there. That, hey, there's all this sort of semi-structured things that you have to make sense of, and in some ways each of those government RFPs is a beautiful and unique snowflake, but in some ways you sort of want a lot of the same interesting information out of them.
Mm.
That's actually a really hard problem to solve, and to figure out how do you ingest those, how you break those up, how you make sense of those in a way that kind of makes sense and structured. And it was exciting in that, like I said, after a couple of years of really trying to present people with things that they weren't sure that they wanted, and different at Maven, oh, how about we do these social things these fundamentally different ways. It was something that it was very clear that if you could solve this pain point for people, and a lot of these people are small businesses who just honestly might not even be able to afford to regularly respond to these RFPs without this kind of technology and help, because it is immensely labor intensive to come in, take an RFP, first find it from any one of tens of thousands of state, local education providers or federal, sort of find it, figure out if you can even win it. We have people describe to us that, yeah, it used to be that sometimes they read through it for a day and you get to the bottom, oh crap, we can't win this.
Oh, rough.
This is actually not for us, after pouring through 70 or pages of it. And so it was something that could provide very clear, if you could help people, hey, help me make sense of all these thousands of things coming out every day, get a very deep understanding of what my business does and what is actually interesting to us versus what's not. And then help me break this down, figure out what I actually need to do. Do I even qualify? Okay, what do I
Hmm.
actually even need to do to win this? And then ultimately help me get together this response so I can go win this thing. Because the tragedy, I think, was that without some of this technology, it would sort of be the usual, all the same usual companies sort of applying, responding to these RFPs because they're just larger and they could afford to, and they had people dedicated and they had a mature process versus somebody saying, hey, look, we do great work, but we just don't have time to set somebody full time on this. If you can help me actually, you know, let these places know that I exist and we do good work and we've done good work in the past, it makes a difference to these, great small businesses who are just they're just trying to do great work out there. And
Well,
it feels like we need a lot of that.
and I mean, the government too, like, I think people don't really understand or have a appreciation for just how huge of a employment opportunity the government is with
Yeah.
these RFPs, right? Like, aren't the numbers just like kind of massive with the scale of like available opportunities to go after across all the different, areas that they issue them?
Yeah, I mean it's enormous. It's a huge piece. I won't quote things I don't know well off the top of my head, but it's an enormous piece of the economy. And again, it's when they're looking for specific things, and you could just be easily lost in that sea of like real contracts and real opportunities to be done. So, a lot of these things aren't small, they're real, they're large continuing projects. And across every level of government, it's just, there's things needed at the federal level, like states have their, sometimes their own purchasing, the counties do it, cities do it. And so, yeah, when you add all that up, it makes a pretty significant measure of yeah, just economic activity that you can be involved in. The government can be, an enormous customer.
How is JustWin leveraging AI like to help empower small businesses in this? I know you kind of mentioned a few things, but
Yeah.
maybe we can unpack that a little more.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of different parts of it, and I've come to appreciate how hard each one of these in the whole process. So, first there's finding these things, right? So because the federal database, the SAM database, is a little bit more centralized. But when you start to get to state and local and all of these things, it's just spread across tens of thousands of entities. And so, the way you might have to find them might be subscribed to, a dozen of these things. And like I said, cumulatively, thousands of these things can be coming out every day. So, sort of the first part is, we have our customer base. They come in, they through a pretty easy process. They can sort of generally describe what they do. Like, okay, well, we're a marketing business. We're kind of focused in these areas, and this is what makes a really good RFP for us, and this is what doesn't. And so, instead of having to go just search and track these down or just scan the list, we're taking each one of those things, and we can now practically at scale sort of pick them apart, figure out, okay, who's the customer for this? What is it? If we need to go out and get more information about it, okay, break down the actual, again, could be 100-page PDF document on, hey, is this something that could fit for them? So, without that AI element, again, picking it apart, it can be a very hard and noisy search problem otherwise, but instead it's like, okay, it's the AI is, scanning sort of each one of these and trying to make sense of it for the customers. So that's first part. That's kind of the sourcing. Then, we're sending those along, we're scoring those for users because, like, in any, CRM like environment, you might have a lot of these opportunities coming in every day, right? So a lot of times there's, unless you're in a little niche kind of area, and that can be its own problem of okay, well, whenever somebody talks about this, I really want to know. But that can be its own problem of, okay, well, cool. There's probably 100 of these that I could do. What is really in my wheelhouse or not? And
Hmm.
again, that's something that the AI becomes very good at, sort of going through and scoring these and saying, yeah, this is a customer who's really in your wheelhouse. This really aligns with the things you want to do. It feels like you should be interested. You can win this.
Hmm.
So that's sort of the second part where AI is really important, of focusing that attention. And then the third part, sort of in responding, right? Of, okay, when you have those giant documents, a lot of this is making sure you're compliant, right? That when you write your response, which itself might be 50 pages, right?
You're right,
That
right.
all of the things that they laid out that you're supposed to do that you're doing. And again, through having the AI sort of scan all of that and make sense of it and say, hey, careful, you missed this, or this is an important piece. Then users are able to say, okay, great, we're, you know, hey, I have something similar I've responded to in the past. I can do this. Here's how I make sure that I'm responding to the correct things. And so like finally making that response, whether it's making sure you hit all the items that it said for, or actually helping you to, write some of that content based on great things you've done in the past, that the AI is pretty fundamental to being able to respond to that, in an efficient way for you small business.
It's awesome, man. It sounds like you guys are kind of like combining like a lot of useful use cases into like a comprehensive solution in a Goliath of things, right? It's wild, man. Yeah, I mean, and you've also mentioned too, like the concept of open-endedness in AI. Can you define what that is and share why that matters?
Yeah, while I was doing my dissertation, my hobby, the thing that sort of kept me distracted, was working. There was a project called Pick Breeder that I worked on with a professor there, Kenneth Stanley, and it became a big part of sort of my broader interest in AI, and it intersects in sort of interesting ways. Like I said, it was the ideas, sort of more colloquially, it's kind of, open-endedness is when these sort of complex systems can kind of grow in complexity and interestingness without bounds. So we talk about, the usual examples are like, oh, okay, sort of evolution overall,
Hmm.
is this cool open-ended system where interesting things always come out of it, or sort of, the human economy and creativity and scientific endeavor of, well, actually, unlike a lot of things in AI that are very constrained, or hey, this is the task at hand, and these are the parameters you have to solve. You can get very good at these things, but they never become more interesting over time. Open-endedness sort of instead deals with, okay, well, what about systems that can become more interesting over time?
Hmm.
And so, and through these unexpected stepping stones, Ken Stanley, former co-founder on Maven, he loves to talk about stepping stones where when you really are trying to do, and he wrote a whole book about it, of why greatness can't be planned, the myth of the objective. And in it, he talks about actually the research he and I and a lot of other people at UCF had done together, where we were working on this pick breeder system, and we would find that when you do, it was this web-based system where you would select images that were interesting to you, and these images were drawn by neural networks, and you would mate and mutate kind of the more interesting ones, and when you found somebody else's that they had done, you were able to branch that one off and take it in a whole different direction. And he found, interestingly enough, that that actually got you to more interesting places faster than starting with this objective of what you wanted to be.
Hmm.
And in the book, which is great, I highly recommend it, that he sort of goes on to say, actually, not only is that really important for these sort of algorithms, but it's really an important principle that kind of governs our lives too,
Hmm.
where life is this very interesting kind of open-ended system, and can be enormously complex. And when you are trying to solve really ambitious problems, and you're beelining straight for that problem, it's not always obvious, and a lot of times you can sort of grind against that and say, okay, well, we're making this thing slightly better. And instead, when you go to these sort of interesting stepping stones that kind of feel like they don't have anything to do with where you want to go, you actually end up where you want it to go faster. So you discover
Hmm.
these things, it's like, oh, when the transistor was made, the intent wasn't to make digital computers, it was to do sort of faster, better, and more power efficient radio things. Then people discovered, oh, actually, you can do all these cool, interesting things with them. So it's something that I have, a huge kind of amateur interest in And, also when at the Maven, that for startup, I mean, that was sort of core to how we wanted to design that social network. But, even though that, that sort of wound out, it's a principle, it's both a principle and an interest that I keep in the rest of my life, where a lot of times, I find that the solutions to these like really hard problems, and I think a lot in AI, and we'll find lots of these interesting things in AI, will be able to be used in these unexpected ways and get us places that we just could not have imagined, beforehand.
No, it's interesting. I mean, like, and you think about how many times, like, like Einstein talks about taking a walk and ideas come to mind, or the shower thoughts, right? Or things where, like, throwing up at things in the mix and not being so overly focused on one simple thing all the time can actually lead to, like, and knocking some things around, right? Like getting some ideas for things. It's awesome, man. And kind of not totally related, but somewhat. What are your thoughts? I mean, we're seeing kind of a mix of like agents and co-pilot things. Like, what are your thoughts on AI as a co-pilot versus AI as an agent, and where should the boundary lie from your point of view in giving systems more autonomy?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think it's been coming up a lot lately. I saw this great post on X by Carpathy. And I agree with the sentiment that he was saying, actually it feels like maybe in the last even a couple of months, because again, and months can be lifetimes in sort of new AI land, that things have become almost overly agentic too fast. He talks about,
Yeah.
yeah, when many of us are using cursor to write code or other, AI, assistants, and um, it can be, you may want it to, like a lot of people YOLO with Claude Code and sort of say, okay, yeah, no, keep going, like keep pushing this forward. But you made the good point. It's like, actually, sometimes you don't want that. The agent is going too far. And you really want to be able to just say, no, 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 I need a quick check, or I need a quick answer on this. Like this is as much as I need. And I think I think, and he talks about like, oh, well, someday these systems probably will, sort of offer that as a parameter itself, right? Of being able to say, well, how autonomous, how far do you want me to go with this? Because I think it can be, again, in this sort of effort. I mean, the agentic things coming are very interesting. Let me say that
Right.
the, sort of the amount of time, I think it's very cool. For instance, the thought of, well, yeah, what if you gave an AI, sort of both interests in things and a very long time horizon to work on stuff. Like if you
Mhm.
said, okay, well, it's interested in this, and you gave it 6 months to build things and build things on top of those things and came back, that would be fascinating, right? To
Yeah.
say, okay, well, this is like fully agentic to the point where it is not really even trying to do my work. It is trying to figure out what it wants and do cool things, that it finds interesting. I think it'll be absolutely fascinating to see what comes out of stuff like that. At the same time, I think a lot of success of applying AI over, in real products over the last couple of years has been trying to constrain the process, right? Of like
Right. Right.
knowing, okay, the thing will do really well on this, and different models form differently, and whatever, but it will do really well on this. Okay, let's get it going on this thing, and let's give these guardrails to it. And I think sometimes in those contexts, agent-based approaches can sort of just kind of degrade to, well, okay, is this really just, it becomes almost about code organization more than anything versus, okay,
Right.
I truly want this thing to be agentic. I want it to, yeah, and the kind of Claude code is like, it's going to search my code or means to search the web. And I think, yeah, so I think the line for me is just, it will be different in all those applications. And it's about me as the user being able to express, yeah, that's as far as I needed to go on this right now. Or no, I need it. It's fine. This should go on, for a long time and do something very interesting here.
Yeah, it's funny too because I feel like there's kind of a perception that people have around this stuff where, like, I've been talking to people that have been trying out different agentic things in the browser, right? And they're like, yeah, it's cool. I can see that it's doing things, but I could have actually just gone and done it faster myself, And you're like, yeah, it's like it feels like we're not quite there yet with a lot of the fit on this. It
Yeah.
feels like, oh, we're trying to see what the thing can do, but like not necessarily that useful yet. I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. Yeah.
I think you're right because it's sort of the example of okay, everybody seems to have this dream of, yeah, I just tell, I tell the agent to go out and, we're going on a vacation, so we're traveling. And what people seem to try to struggle to present kind of is the like, oh, and then I came back and an hour later and tickets were booked and things were done. And well, not only is that not comfortable for a lot of people, but it's
Right.
just okay. It's just not what a lot of people are looking for right now versus, hey, it may actually be a lot more useful. It's like, oh, I'm on a giant page of tours. Oh, okay, yeah. Hey, can you tell me which one, starts in the after? Can you give me the one that starts in the afternoon and hits both, Big Ben and Bath, England, or whatever? As okay,
Mhm.
I can scan through and I can give that to you, and I didn't need to go off and book in or whatever. It's just like I answered a useful question and then I was able to put that together. And I think again, it does come back to like I don't as a user, I don't want to feel like I'm panicked and pushing the stop button.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think in that vein too, like how do you kind of weigh the trade-offs right now between innovation and privacy? It does seem like there's some interest coming around on privacy on this stuff, but it does feel like it's kind of an afterthought still. But I'm just kind of curious your take on it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean it's been pretty core to everything that I try to do all the, throughout my career. So I think that one, I sort of try to live by that principle of like, okay, if I don't really know why we need this information, just don't collect it. And I think
Right.
that's, it's been helpful in that because it felt like for a while the really, the running sort of wisdom around, failing wisdom around this was hey, you need to instrument a system and you need to, have data collected so that you have everything. You want to be able to track things, make recommendations, and do all this stuff. And I think the reality of it is like, well, doing correct analytics tracking and understanding user behaviors and all that stuff is actually very hard and it's
Yeah.
easy to get subtly wrong. This you
Yeah.
could easily look at all that data you collect and it's like, oh yeah, no, we were supposed to do it like this, and now I'm just it's like we must have spent $20. So I think that it doesn't really work out as much as people think it should. And then there's a principle I think that's kind of emerging that I think is interesting that I think is sort of generally applied to before, and is now specifically I think applying to LLMs, where I think before you could really collect you could really think you're going to bring a lot more information to bear on, let's say, a recommendation or on a, you know, guy, recommending user behavior or whatever, and think like, okay, well, if I knew this about them, and if I knew, what they were doing here to do that, and then, I would be able to make this great recommendation. A lot of times, recommendations can be simple, like so. Canonical example on that is like, oh, people are searching for things around noon. A lot of times they're interested in lunch, right? And you're able
Right.
to, it's an example of a thing where you're able to use simple and, not very privacy invasive kind of signals to really do a good job. And sometimes the simpler recommendation is the better one. So I've always tried to keep that in mind when, okay, well, even if you had all the information, what information would you really want to start with on this?
Mhm.
A lot of the way there. And I think interestingly enough, I've sort of seen it mirrored on LLMs and things like that, where, kind of you'll hear people talk about this emerging contextual engineering and how important that is. And it's like, okay, well, that's providing the prompt engineering is really important to sort of steering and telling the LLM what you want, but this contextual engineering of hey, you may be doing some rag system or providing them what other context around, what they're doing. And you can definitely get into, situations where you're just saying too much. You're providing more irrelevant stuff and, you may not get the same performance that you're looking out of for there. So it's like, okay, just because you have a 400,000 character context window doesn't mean you should use it. Token context window doesn't mean you should use all of it, right? Like,
Right, right.
so sometimes it does pay to sort of carefully choose what information you have. And so for me, I try to start from those principles anyway of saying, okay, well, those things will actually steer you to be just more private by default, and a lot of times come out with a better product. Like, well, I think back to when we worked at Brave, right? Or when I worked at Brave.
Yeah, 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 I get it. I get it.
Back to when I worked at Brave, and when we were putting together the ad system and kind of taking that to different, advertisers and marketers, and they would ask, okay, well, yeah, so you're going to do this very private by design ad system. Are you going to be able to give me all these great reports about the demographics and all this and these huge studies that a lot of their partners had typically provided them? And our line always, I believe this was, hey, we're not going to maybe provide you everything that you used to get, but we're going to provide you exactly what you need.
Right.
And in some ways, sometimes that's just better of like, actually, here was the real signal that you needed to make a difference to things. And so, a lot of times that less is more that is, kind of aligned with privacy is just better anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that again, it's more important than ever now that people kind of understand like what they shared with who and why and for what, right? It's like, well, because now if you can have agents actually going out and doing your bidding and accessing, your accounts and Gmail and things like that, this is pretty private territory, right? And
Hmm.
you both want to know, okay, this is exactly what I've enabled for everybody. This is exactly what we have, and it's going to be in your control to shut it off if you need to.
Yeah, totally. If you could make a big bet, what's one bold prediction you have for the future of tech that you're be willing to put a bet on today?
So let's see. The thing that's on my mind lately is, especially with the GPT-5 release, you saw that happen. They went big and bold on saying they're going to deprecate all the other models, that the one to rule them all. And a lot of media pushback from people sort of saying, hey, no, I had actually grown accustomed to the nuance. Like, I loved 4.5 and I had grown accustomed to it, or, where people had, not a lot of people used 4.5, but people who had very particular tastes in this. And my prediction is sort of in 18 months, you'll see sort of more common consumer level things, maybe from big tech companies or from sort of very motivated startups and things, trying to draw the right line around, model ownership, right? It's saying goes on X, not your weights, not your model, kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and so it's like, whereas maybe a year ago there wasn't strong interest in, or I mean, there wasn't as much interest in sort of device level intelligence of like, okay, well, what could I actually run on a phone or run locally or whatever. And I think I predict you're going to start to see some of that converge into, um, kind of consumer level products where the consumer feels confident that's like, okay, and I mean, especially you start seeing interesting things like, well, this is an AI companion that is like a core part of my life that I really enjoy being around and is important to me, that people will sort of feel more importance around the ownership of that. And of course, that's aligned with privacy too. So
Totally.
I think some of those things will become so core to people that in ways we really hadn't seen over the last 20 years, you will start to see, migration to kind of local device, owned weights, things that you can own and reproduce and, have greater control over as the consumer. Um, where it felt like there were a lot of, there were interest in that over, let's say, the last 20 years. It's like, okay, well, I can host my own this and this, or, I can host my own file storage or host my own email or whatever. And it just sort of never, there was always an interesting baseline of people who would do it, but, wouldn't go too far and wide. And I think you'll start to see that become a lot more important to people because like, this is actually quite core to, my life or my business or what I do. And I need to be in control of the changes to it.
Totally. No, yeah, you're right. It didn't ever feel like it escaped the garage, but I think
Yeah.
now with what we're seeing, it's totally like I would totally bet on that. Like with what we're seeing now, with how just how these things are operating too. I mean, like so it's so interesting too. Like there's such a scramble to get AI everywhere, kind of from the C suites down at Fortune 2000s. I don't know when the last time where I've seen that happen at that kind of a pace. And so now you're just kind of seeing all this noise, but like we're also seeing a lot of the side effects of that. And yeah, I think this local stuff will get a lot of attention, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, dude, like this has been fantastic, man. I mean, where can people find you online and find out more about your work and follow along?
Oh yeah. So you can follow me. I do converse with people on Blue Sky sometimes, and at let's see, what am I at Blue Sky? I don't even know. I'm at Secretan
Excellent.
social on Blue Sky. And
Excellent.
you can or if you're curious about what JustWin does, go to justwin.ai. And yeah, so I'm
Perfect.
always happy to talk.
Awesome, man. Like we'll include it in the show notes too. But yeah, dude, thanks, Jimmy, for coming by. This was a great conversation. Love to have you back too. Check back in on things and yeah, get more POV. It's awesome, man.
All right, thanks, Luke, for taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks for listening to the Brave Technologist podcast. To never miss an episode, make sure you hit follow in your podcast app. If you haven't already made the switch to the Brave browser, you can download it for free today at brave.com and start using Brave Search, which enables you to search the web privately. Brave also shields you from the ads, trackers, and other creepy stuff following you across the web.